G'day and welcome to another video with Better Pics. Hope this finds you all well and healthy. Just wanted to do a quick follow-up video today with my recent video around creating a HDR image in Adobe Camera Raw. And while the process in Lightroom is pretty much identical, there are a few obvious differences with the layout in Lightroom, so I just wanted to create a video specific for Lightroom as well. So as you can see, I have the same 5 images that I used in Adobe Camera Raw, and basically what we're going to do is exactly the same, where we're going to combine those into a HDR. So you can see 5 different exposures, from overexposed to purposely underexposed. And the reason that is this environment, as you can see, is extremely contrasty. It's much brighter much brighter outside this cave than it is inside. So it falls outside of the acceptable dynamic range that a camera can capture detail in cleanly. So it can certainly capture detail, but there is clipping, and in order to recover that detail in the shadows and the highlights, you'll see that there is some issues that we encounter. So the best way in this example to retain detail in all areas is to shoot multiple exposures and then blend them in post, and that's what's called a HDR image, or also known as high dynamic range. So creating a higher dynamic range than what the camera can normally record with a single exposure. Alright, so what I'm going to do, I've got the 5 images here, and I'm just going to select all 5, and I'm going to right click, and we are going to go up to Photo Merge and HDR. You'll see that the shortcut there was Control H. If you are a user of shortcuts like I am, they certainly help to speed up your workflow. Alright, so status bar there, you can see it's creating the HDR preview. Just on the right hand side, you can see that there's auto align. So obviously these images were all photographed with a tripod, so they're perfectly aligned on top of each other. You do have the option there for auto settings, but I tend to like working on the resulting digital negative file, specifically in Lightroom, as a normal editing process. You've also got the option there of deghosting, same as in Adobe Camera Raw, so none, low, medium and high. So the difference, exactly the same as I mentioned. So if you do have any movement of any of the elements within your image, then that will do its best to remove that ghosting effect that you'll see. And obviously the option there to show deghost overlay. Create stack is also there as an option as well. So you can see it's done the overlay. It says up there all 5 images successfully merged, but it's not actually showing a preview of what the final image will look like, because we will be editing that afterwards. So we're just going to hit merge. Okay, so one thing you will probably notice immediately with the workflow in Lightroom as opposed to Adobe Camera Raw is in Adobe Camera Raw, you're prompted to save the new digital negative file in a specific location, and you can of course select any location on your hard drive to be able to save that file. Now with Lightroom, it actually creates the extra file for you, automatically imports it, and saves that digital negative in the same folder that the original files came from. So that's really handy. That's a little bit quicker than the Adobe Camera Raw process, because you don't need to go through that saving process for the new file. So as you can see, we have the new digital negative file there, and you can see that just on the file name there, it's acquired one of the names from one of the files with a -hdr.dng afterwards. So whenever you're going through managing your library of images, you'll be able to certainly be aware that that image is there. Now the DNG HDR image doesn't really look any different to one of the original files that we created, or photographed. So it's kind of like, well, has it actually done anything? Well, yes, it has. What it does is it allows you then, through the edit process, to draw upon those various exposures to be able to create your final edit. So for example, at the moment, you can see the highlights are very well blown out. Now, as I drop those highlights, you can see that the quality of the highlights is really good. So it's actually drawing upon that underexposed image, so image number 1 and 2, to be able to create really nice highlights with all of the detail. You can see, particularly in the water, for anybody that's done long exposure photography with waterfalls in rainforests, you would know that it's very easy to overexpose the water, which is why often a HDR image is a good way to go. So you can see that there's really beautiful detail everywhere there within the waterfall. There's no clipping at all, and that's worked really well. All right, now with the shadows, you can see obviously the inside of this cave is very dark. If we now push the shadows, you can see that it draws upon that overexposed image, so image number 5, to then be able to display all of that beautiful detail in the cave roof. Now, I'm going to show you in a second with one of the individual frames that you can actually get a lot of detail on the roof, but the quality of the detail isn't great. So if I select image 3, which is the same image that I selected in Adobe Camera Raw as a demonstration, and I drop the highlights to -100 and I lift the shadows to +100, one of the things that you'll see first is we've lost detail outside. So it's definitely clipped that detail outside, and that is not able to be recovered, as well as you can see the water in the waterfall. Oops, the water in the waterfall is also overexposed, so we're not able to retain that detail in the waterfall, unfortunately. Now, if we go right up into the corner, you will actually see the presence of quite a bit of noise as well. So, unfortunately, when you push shadows this hard, you do get quite a bit of noise, whereas the HDR version, you will see, is very, very clean with lots of lovely detail, because it's drawing upon the exposure that was created specifically to retain the detail in those shadow areas. So you will find between those two images, you can see the overall retaining of detail in the highlights and shadows is much better if we compare with that second image to that image where all of that detail has been lost. So obviously with Lightroom, you can continue on editing the image to create the final piece that you want. All I've done so far is drop the highlights and raise the shadows, but you obviously have all of the usual tools: contrast, sharpness, saturation, a whole bunch of options to really get that image tuned and the way that you want it as a final piece. But for the purposes of demonstration, you can absolutely see with a single frame, when trying to withhold those highlights and obviously keep all the detail in the shadows, the quality will never be the same as an image that has been shot specifically with multiple exposures and then blended into a HDR, particularly in this case where the difference between shadow and highlights is huge. So hopefully that has helped you understand not only what a HDR image is, but also the process to go about editing and creating and controlling your highlights and shadows within Adobe Lightroom. It's certainly a fairly quick and easy process, and compared to the old methods of creating HDR images, it's certainly much quicker and much more efficient, and it means that you can stay within your chosen editing platform, which is always a good thing. Thanks again for stopping by. I hope you've enjoyed this video. As always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, look forward to seeing you again in the future, and hope you have a great day. Thanks again, and take care.